I swear to God, Judith, if you don't get out of my kitchen right now, I'll. You'll what, dear? Serve us undercooked chicken? I'm only trying to help. I gripped the serving spoon so hard my knuckles turned white. The urge to fling scalding gravy at my mother-in-law's perfectly coiffed hair was almost overwhelming. But I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and turned to face her. I appreciate the offer, but I've got this under control. Why don't you join the others in the living room? I'm sure Ethan would love to show you the new entertainment system. Judith's lips thinned, but she nodded curtly and left the kitchen. I sagged against the counter, exhausted. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, our housewarming party, celebrating the completion of our dream home. Instead, it felt like a battlefield. My name is Lila, and I'm beginning to wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. Everything okay in here? Ethan's warm voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I leaned into his embrace. Your mother's driving me crazy, I muttered. He sighed. I know. I'm sorry. She means well, she just has a funny way of showing it. I finished for him. Ethan kissed the top of my head. It'll get better. They just need time to adjust. I wanted to believe him. But the snide comments and disapproving looks from Judith and Veronica, Ethan's sister, had been relentless since we announced our engagement 3 years ago. Now, with my mother Sylvia living with us, their hostility had reached new heights. Lila. My mother's soft voice called from the hallway. Do you need any help, sweetheart? I extracted myself from Ethan's arms and went to greet her. Sylvia sat in her wheelchair, a gentle smile on her face. I'm fine, Mom. Just putting the finishing touches on dinner. It smells wonderful, she said. I'm so proud of you, honey. This house, this party, you've done an amazing job. Warmth bloomed in my chest at her words. Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you and Ethan. A high-pitched laugh from the living room made me wince. Veronica's voice carried clearly. I still can't believe they built a ramp instead of stairs. It looks so institutional. I closed my eyes, willing myself not to react. When I opened them, Sylvia was watching me with concern. Don't let them get to you, she said softly. This is your home, Lila. You and Ethan built it with love. I nodded, squeezing her hand. I know. I just wish they could see that. The timer on the oven beeped, saving me from further conversation. I hurried back to the kitchen, Ethan close behind. I'll set the table, he offered. Thanks, love. As I pulled the roast from the oven, voices drifted in from the living room. It's just not right, Judith was saying. Ethan should be focusing on his career, not playing nursemaid to his mother-in-law. I know, Veronica agreed. Lila's holding him back. He could do so much better. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled, nearly dropping the heavy dish. Whoa. Ethan steadied me, concern etched on his face. Are you okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He frowned, clearly not believing me, but let it go. Dinner's ready, I called out, my voice only slightly strained. As everyone gathered around the table, I tried to shake off the overheard conversation. But Judith's critical gaze and Veronica's smug smile made it impossible to relax. This looks interesting, Judith said, eyeing the roast dubiously. It's Ethan's favorite, I replied, forcing a smile. Right, honey? Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Lila's an amazing cook. When she has time to cook, you mean? Veronica chimed in. It must be so hard, juggling work and taking care of your mother. I don't know how you manage it all, Lila. The implication was clear. I didn't manage it all. Not well, anyway. We managed just fine, Ethan said firmly. Mom, would you like some wine? As conversation flowed around me, I found myself retreating inward. The dream home we'd worked so hard to build suddenly felt like a gilded cage. Every choice we'd made, from the open floor plan to accommodate Sylvia's wheelchair to the soothing color palette I'd agonized over, was now tainted by Judith and Veronica's judgment. A toast, Judith announced, raising her glass. To new beginnings and family coming together. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a threat. As we clinked glasses, I caught Sylvia's eye across the table. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would not let Judith and Veronica destroy what we'd built. This was our home, our family, and I would fight to protect it no matter the cost. Little did I know just how high that cost would be. The alarm blared, jolting me awake. I reached over to silence it, my hand brushing against Ethan's empty side of the bed. He'd already left for work, probably hours ago. The clock read 7:15 a.m. I'd overslept again. Shit, I muttered, throwing off the covers. As I rushed through my morning routine, guilt gnawed at me. Ethan had been working longer hours lately, the stress etched into the lines on his face. I should be doing more to support him, not sleeping in. I found my mother in the kitchen, already dressed and sipping her morning tea. "Good morning, sweetheart," Sylvia said, her smile warm. "I've made you some toast and coffee to go." "You're a lifesaver, Mom," I said, grabbing the travel mug and kissing her cheek. "I'm sorry I can't stay and chat. I'm running late." "Don't worry about me," she assured me. "Go, have a good day at work." As I rushed out the door, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." I sighed, typing back a quick "love you" before starting the car. It seemed like we were ships passing in the night lately, barely having time for more than a quick kiss or hurried conversation. The workday flew by in a blur of meetings and deadlines. By the time I got home, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I found Sylvia in the living room, her brow furrowed as she stared at her phone. "Everything okay, Mom?" I asked, setting down my bag. She looked up, startled. "Oh, Lila, I didn't hear you come in." "It's nothing, dear. Just, well, Judith called earlier." My stomach clenched. What did she want? Sylvia hesitated. "She and Veronica are coming over tomorrow. They said they need to discuss something important with you and Ethan." "Of course they are," I muttered, collapsing onto the couch. "Did they bother to ask if we're free? Or if it's okay to just show up?" "You know how they are, sweetheart," Sylvia said gently. "Try not to let it get to you." But it did get to me. All through dinner and into the night, as I waited for Ethan to come home, my mind raced with possibilities. What could be so important? And why did it feel like a trap? It was past midnight when I heard Ethan's key in the lock. He stumbled in, looking haggard and pale. "Hey," I said softly, rising from the couch. "You okay?" He nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Just tired. Big project at work. I'm going to bed." "Ethan, wait." I called after him. "Your mom and sister are coming over tomorrow. They said it's important." He paused on the stairs, his shoulders tensing. "Can't deal with that right now, Lila. We'll talk in the morning." But morning came, and Ethan was gone before I woke up. Again, the doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before opening the door. "Lila, darling." Judith cooed, air-kissing my cheeks. "You look tired. Are you getting enough rest?" "I'm fine," I said through gritted teeth. "Please come in." Veronica breezed past me without a word, her designer perfume leaving a cloying trail. They settled themselves in the living room as if they owned the place. "Where's Ethan?" Judith demanded. "This concerns him too." "He's at work," I replied, perching on the edge of an armchair. "He's been very busy lately." Veronica sniffed. "I'm sure he has. It can't be easy, supporting so many people on one salary." I bit back a retort. "What's this about? You said it was important." Judith leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "We're worried about Ethan, dear. He's working himself to the bone, and for what? A house he can barely afford, caring for a mother-in-law who—" "That's enough," I snapped. "My mother is not a burden. Ethan and I made this decision together." "Did you?" Veronica asked, her tone sickly sweet. "Or did you manipulate him into it?" Before I could respond, the front door opened. Ethan walked in, looking even worse than he had last night. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze darting between us. "Oh, Ethan," Judith cried, rushing to embrace him. "We've been so worried about you. You work too hard, you look ill. This can't go on." I watched, helpless, as Ethan sagged into his mother's arms. The fight seemed to drain out of him. "I'm fine, Mom," he mumbled. "Just tired." "You're not fine," Veronica insisted. "You need to take care of yourself. Maybe it's time to reconsider some things." The implication hung heavy in the air. I felt my world tilting on its axis. "I think you should go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Judith turned to me, her eyes cold. "We're not going anywhere. Ethan needs us. His real family." As they fussed over Ethan, guiding him to the couch, I retreated to the kitchen. My hands shook as I filled a glass with water. When I turned around, Judith was standing in the doorway. "This isn't personal, Lila," she said, her voice low. "But Ethan deserves better than this. Arrangement. You must see that." She pressed something into my hand, an envelope, before sweeping out of the room. I stared after her, my heart pounding. With trembling fingers, I opened the letter. "My dearest son," it began in Judith's flowery script. "It's time to come home. Leave Lila. For the sake of your real family." The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. And with it, the last of my illusions about this family I'd married into. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the pre-dawn silence. My heart raced as I fumbled for it, instantly awake. No good news ever came at 4:30 a.m. "Mrs. Harrison? This is Mercy Hospital. Your husband, Ethan, has been admitted. He collapsed at work." The world tilted on its axis. I barely registered the rest of the conversation, my mind a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Somehow, I managed to wake my mother, call a neighbor to stay with her, and drive to the hospital without crashing. The emergency room was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. A harried nurse directed me to a curtained-off area where Ethan lay, pale and still against starched white sheets. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring his vital signs. "Ethan," I whispered, grasping his hand. It was cold and limp in mine. "I'm here. You're going to be okay." A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Harrison? I'm Dr. Patel. Your husband suffered a severe panic attack, likely brought on by extreme stress and exhaustion. We're running tests to rule out any underlying conditions, but for now, he needs rest." I nodded numbly, guilt washing over me. How had I not seen how bad things had gotten? I'd been so caught up in my own struggles with Judith and Veronica that I'd missed the signs of Ethan's deteriorating health. As if summoned by my thoughts, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Judith's shrill voice cut through the hospital's quiet hum. "Where is my son? I demand to see him immediately." I steeled myself as Judith and Veronica burst into the small space, their eyes wild with a mixture of concern and accusation. "What have you done to him?" Judith hissed, pushing past me to Ethan's bedside. "I haven't done anything," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "He collapsed at work. The doctor says." "Oh, spare us your excuses," Veronica sneered. "We all know who's really to blame here. If Ethan wasn't working himself to death trying to support you and your mother." "That's enough, Dr. Patel interrupted, her voice firm. "Mr. Harrison needs rest and calm. If you can't provide that, I'll have to ask you to leave." Judith turned on the doctor, her eyes flashing. "Do you know who we are? We're his family. His real family." The words stung, but I refused to let them see how deeply they cut. "Please," I said quietly, "let's not do this here. Ethan needs us to be united right now." For a moment, it seemed like my plea had gotten through. Then Judith's face hardened. "United? You're the reason he's in this state. If you truly cared about Ethan, you'd step aside and let us take care of him." Before I could respond, a weak voice cut through the tension. "Stop it." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. "All of you, just stop." We all froze, watching as Ethan struggled to sit up. I moved to help him, but Judith beat me to it, fussing over him like he was a child. "Oh, darling," she cooed. "Don't worry. We're here now. We'll take you home, and—" "No," Ethan said, his voice stronger now. "I'm not going anywhere. Lila is my wife. This is my family. All of you. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt a glimmer of hope, seeing Ethan stand up to his mother for perhaps the first time in his life. But it was short-lived. Ethan's face suddenly contorted in pain. He clutched at his chest, gasping for air. Alarms blared as his body went rigid, then limp. Code Blue. DR. Patel shouted, pushing us aside. A team of nurses rushed in, and I found myself being ushered out of the room, Judith and Veronica's wails echoing in my ears. The next few hours passed in a haze of fear and disbelief. I sat in the waiting room, numb, as Judith paced and Veronica sobbed dramatically. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, her face grave, I knew before she spoke. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "We did everything we could, but Mr. Harrison suffered a massive heart attack. He didn't make it. The world stopped." I heard Judith's anguished scream, as if from a great distance. Veronica collapsed into a chair, her makeup streaking down her face. But I felt nothing, just a vast, echoing emptiness where my heart used to be. As the reality of Ethan's death sank in, Judith's grief twisted into something uglier. She rounded on me, her face contorted with rage and pain. "This is your fault," she spat. "You killed my son with your selfishness. You and that mother of yours." I should have defended myself. Should have pointed out that it was their constant pressure and manipulation that had driven Ethan to this breaking point. But I was too shell-shocked to form words. "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth," Veronica chimed in, her voice thick with tears and venom. "You'll pay for what you've done, Lila." As they continued their tirade, hurling accusations and threats, I retreated into myself. The Ethan I knew and loved wouldn't have wanted this. He'd wanted peace, wanted us to be a family. But that dream had died with him. I stood up abruptly, cutting off Judith mid-rant. "I'm going to say goodbye to my husband," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You can continue this later." Ignoring their protests, I walked back into Ethan's room. He looked peaceful now, the lines of stress erased from his face. I took his hand one last time, my tears finally falling. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you from all of this. But I promise you, Ethan, I'll find a way to honor your memory, to live the life we dreamed of, even if you can't be here to share it." As I pressed a final kiss to his forehead, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. Judith and Veronica would stop at nothing to destroy me now. But for Ethan's sake, and for my own, I had to be stronger than ever before. The drive home from Ethan's funeral was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I navigated through the rain-slicked streets. Beside me, Mom sat in silence, her weathered hand resting on my arm, a silent pillar of strength. "We're almost home," I murmured, more to myself than to her. Home. The word felt hollow now, tainted by loss and the lingering echoes of Judith and Veronica's accusations at the cemetery. As we pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The porch light was on, casting an eerie glow in the gathering dusk. I frowned. I was sure I'd turned it off before we left. "Lila," Mom said softly, her eyes fixed on the front door. "There's someone inside." My heart raced as I saw movement through the window. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, ready to call the police. But then a familiar silhouette appeared, and my blood ran cold. "It's Judith," I whispered, disbelief and anger warring within me. "And Veronica." Mom's grip on my arm tightened. "What are they doing here?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." With shaking hands, I helped Mom into her wheelchair and approached the front door. I hesitated for a moment, key in hand, before squaring my shoulders and stepping inside. The scene that greeted us was surreal. Judith and Veronica lounged in the living room as if they owned the place. Boxes were stacked haphazardly around them, and I realized with growing horror that they were filled with my belongings. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Judith looked up, her face a mask of faux sympathy. "Oh, Lila dear. We thought it best to get a head start on packing for you. After all, You can't possibly stay here now that Ethan's gone. Veronica nodded, a cruel smile playing at her lips. This house belongs to the family. And let's face it, you're not family anymore. The audacity of their words struck me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, steadying myself against Mom's wheelchair. This is our home, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Ethan and I built it together. You have no right. We have every right, Judith interrupted, her tone icy. Ethan left no will. As his mother and sister were his next of kin. The house, the assets, they all revert to us. I felt the floor shift beneath me. How could I have been so naive? In all our planning, in all our dreams, we'd never considered the unthinkable. We'd never prepared for a world without Ethan. You can't do this. Mom spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. This house was built to accommodate my needs. Where do you expect us to go? Veronica shrugged, examining her manicured nails. That's hardly our concern, is it? You should have thought of that before you leeched off my brother for all these years. White-hot rage surged through me. I stepped forward, fists clenched at my sides. Get out, I snarled. Get out of our house right now. Or I swear to God. Or what? Judith challenged, rising to her feet. Face it, Lila. You've lost. It's time for you to crawl back to whatever hole you came from and leave us to grieve our son in peace. I opened my mouth to retort, but Mom's hand on my arm stopped me. Lila, she said softly. Let's just go. We can figure this out later. The fight drained out of me as I looked into her eyes, seeing the exhaustion and sorrow mirrored there. With a heavy heart, I nodded. Fine, I said, turning back to Judith and Veronica. We'll go. But this isn't over. As we retreated to the guest room, the only space not yet invaded by their presence, I felt hollow. Empty. How had it come to this? In the span of a week, I'd lost my husband, my home, and any illusion of family I'd clung to. Mom watched me as I paced the small room, her eyes filled with concern. What are we going to do? She asked quietly. I ran a hand through my hair, mind racing. I don't know, I admitted, but we can't stay here. Not with them. As I started gathering what few possessions remained untouched, my hand brushed against something wedged between the mattress and headboard. Frowning, I pulled out a sealed envelope. My breath caught as I recognized Ethan's handwriting. With trembling fingers, I tore it open, unfolding the letter inside. My dearest Lila, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry for leaving you to face this alone. But I need you to know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Our life together, our home, the family we built, it was everything I ever wanted. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Ethan's words were filled with love, regret, and a final, desperate plea. Don't let them win, Lila. Don't let my mother and sister destroy what we built. You're stronger than they are. You always have been. Live the life we dreamed of, even if I can't be there to share it. Be free, my love. Be happy. As I finished the letter, a strange calm settled over me. Ethan's final gift wasn't just his words, it was the strength to face what lay ahead. I looked up at Mom, a new resolve burning in my chest. Pack what you can, I said. We're leaving tonight. But where will we go? She asked. I squared my shoulders, Ethan's letter clutched to my heart. I don't know yet, but wherever it is, it'll be ours. And it'll be free of them. As we prepared to leave the house we'd called home, I silently vowed to honor Ethan's memory. Judith and Veronica might have won this battle, but the war was far from over. And I intended to fight with everything I had. The morning light filtered through the dusty motel curtains, casting a sickly glow across the room. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with plans and worries. Mom stirred in the bed beside me, her face etched with concern as she woke. Lila, she said softly, what are we going to do? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the day ahead. We're going to fight, Mom. We're going to take back what's ours. With renewed determination, I helped Mom into her wheelchair, and we made our way back to the house. Our house. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Judith peering out the window, her face twisting with disdain. Remember, I told Mom, no matter what they say, we have a right to be here. We entered without knocking, the familiar scent of home now tainted by Judith's overpowering perfume. Veronica lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone with affected boredom. "Oh, look who's back," Judith sneered. "Come to beg for scraps?" I ignored her, wheeling Mom into the living room. "We're not leaving," I said firmly. "This is our home, and you have no legal right to be here." Veronica laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Is that so? And who's going to make us leave? You? If I have to," I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I've contacted a lawyer. Ethan and I built this house together. Half of it is legally mine." Judith's face darkened. "You ungrateful little—" "That's enough," Mom interrupted, her quiet voice cutting through the tension. "Haven't you done enough damage? Can't you see how much pain you're causing?" For a moment, I saw a flicker of something, regret, shame, in Judith's eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold fury. "Pain," she hissed. "You want to talk about pain? My son is dead because of you. Because he worked himself to death trying to support you and your crippled mother." The words hit like a physical blow. I stumbled back, tears stinging my eyes. But before I could respond, Mom spoke up again. "Ethan loved us," she said softly. "He loved Lila with his whole heart. And he would be ashamed of how you're behaving now." Veronica snorted. "Please. Ethan was too weak to stand up to you. He always was." Something inside me snapped. "Get out," I snarled, advancing on them. "Get out of our house right now, or I swear to God I'll—" "You'll what?" Judith challenged, rising to meet me. "Face it, Lila. You're nothing without Ethan. You can't even take care of yourself, let alone your mother. Why don't you do everyone a favor and just disappear?" I felt the fight drain out of me, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. This was Ethan's family, the people who were supposed to love and support us. How had it come to this? "Fine," I said quietly. "If that's how you want it, we'll go. But don't think for a second this is over." As we turned to leave, Veronica's mocking voice followed us. "Run along now. We'll take good care of Ethan's things. After all, we're the only real family he had." The door slammed behind us, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. I helped Mom into the car, my movements mechanical, numb. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," Mom said, reaching for my hand. "We'll figure something out. We always do." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we drove away from the only home we'd known, I felt something inside me harden. Ethan's words from his letter echoed in my mind. "Don't let them win, Lila. You're stronger than they are." We checked into a small apartment that afternoon, a temporary solution while we figured out our next move. As I helped Mom settle in, my phone buzzed with a text from our lawyer. "Good news," it read. "Found some irregularities in Ethan's finances. Might be grounds for challenging the estate. Call me ASAP." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe all wasn't lost after all. That night, as Mom slept, I sat by the window, staring out at the unfamiliar cityscape. The pain of loss, of Ethan, of our home, of the life we'd built, was still raw. But beneath it, a new resolve was taking root. I thought of Judith and Veronica, so sure in their victory. They thought they'd broken me, driven me away for good. But they'd underestimated me. They always had. "I won't let them win," I whispered to the night. "I'll fight for us, Ethan, for the life we dreamed of. And I'll make sure your real legacy, one of love and kindness, lives on." As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time since Ethan's death, I felt ready to face it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But I was done being a victim. It was time to take control of my own story. And I knew, deep in my heart, that wherever Ethan was, he was cheering me on. 6 months had passed since we'd left our home, and life had settled into a new rhythm. Mom and I had found a small, accessible apartment, and I'd thrown myself into work, determined to build a stable future for us both. The pain of losing Ethan still ached, but it had dulled to a manageable throb. I was sorting through bills at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Lila. The voice was familiar, but strained. It's Veronica. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? Please don't hang up, she pleaded, her usual haughtiness replaced by desperation. We need your help. It's bad, Lila. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to end the call. Why should I help you? After everything you've done? Veronica's voice cracked. I know we don't deserve it, but we have nowhere else to turn. Mom and we've lost everything. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of curiosity. What do you mean, lost everything? She launched into a rambling explanation. Something about an investment opportunity, promises of huge returns. But it had all been a scam. They'd sunk every penny they had, including the money from selling our house, into a fraudulent scheme. We're facing eviction, Veronica finished, her voice small. Mom's a mess. I don't know what to do. A part of me, a vindictive, hurt part, wanted to laugh, to revel in their misfortune. But Ethan's voice echoed in my mind. Be better than them, Lila. Always be better. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I don't see how I can help. Please, Veronica begged. We just need a loan. Enough to get back on our feet. We'll pay you back, I swear. No, I said firmly. I can't do that. I won't. But we're family, she cried. The words hit me like a slap. Family? I repeated, incredulous. You made it very clear that I wasn't family. You took everything from me, Veronica. My home, my memories of Ethan. And now you have the audacity to claim we're family? Silence stretched between us. When Veronica spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. You're right. We were horrible to you. I see that now. I'm so sorry, Lila. For everything. I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring within me. I appreciate the apology, I said finally. But it doesn't change anything. I can't help you. Please, she whispered. We have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem, I replied, surprised by the steel in my voice. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I ended the call, my hands shaking. Mom wheeled into the room, concern etched on her face. Everything okay, sweetheart? I nodded, forcing a smile. Just a wrong number. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. I found myself wondering about Judith and Veronica. Were they really destitute? Part of me wanted to believe it was just another manipulation tactic. But the desperation in Veronica's voice had seemed genuine. A week later, my curiosity got the better of me. I drove past our old house, half expecting to see it as immaculate as ever. Instead, I was shocked to find a for sale sign in the overgrown yard. The paint was peeling, the garden I'd lovingly tended now a tangle of weeds. As I sat in my car, staring at the neglected remnants of our dream home, a flood of memories washed over me. Ethan and I painting the nursery, full of hope for a future that never came. Mom's laughter echoing through the kitchen as we cooked Sunday dinners. The quiet moments on the porch, Ethan's arm around me, planning our life together. Tears blurred my vision. I realized I was gripping Ethan's letter, which I still carried everywhere. His words seemed to leap off the page. Don't let them win, Lila. But don't let bitterness consume you either. With a shaky breath, I started the car and drove to the address Veronica had given me. It was a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. I spotted Judith immediately, sitting on a bench outside one of the rooms. She looked years older, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled and worn. As I approached, her eyes widened in recognition. Lila, she whispered, disbelief etched on her face. What are you doing here? I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. I wanted to see for myself, I said quietly. To understand. Judith's shoulders slumped. Now you have. Are you satisfied? Have you come to gloat? I shook my head. No. I'm not like you, Judith. I don't take pleasure in other people's pain. She flinched at my words, tears welling in her eyes. "We've lost everything," she whispered. "The house, our savings, our reputation. All because I was too proud, too stubborn to see what was right in front of me." "And what was that?" I asked, my voice gentle despite myself. Judith met my gaze, her eyes filled with regret. "That Ethan was happy. That you were good for him. That I was the one tearing our family apart, not you." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of years of conflict and misunderstanding. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a release. The anger and bitterness I'd been carrying began to loosen its grip. "I can't undo what's been done," I said finally. "And I can't give you money or a place to stay. But I can offer you this, a chance to start over, to be better." Judith looked at me, hope and wariness warring in her expression.
"How?"
I stood, smoothing my skirt. "I know a shelter that helps women get back on their feet. Job training, counseling, the whole works. If you're serious about changing, I can make a call." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, Lila. I don't deserve your kindness." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But Ethan would have wanted me to offer it anyway." As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, I felt truly free. Free from the weight of resentment, free from the shadow of Judith and Veronica's cruelty. I was ready to write my own story now, one of resilience, growth, and the kind of love that transcends even death. And I knew, deep in my heart, that Ethan would be proud. The crisp autumn air nipped at my cheeks as I walked through the farmer's market, basket in hand. It had been nearly a year since Ethan's death, and life had settled into a new normal. Mom and I had found peace in our small apartment, and I'd thrown myself into my work, finding purpose in helping others navigate their own grief. As I browsed the colorful produce, a familiar voice caught my attention. I turned to see Sarah, an old friend from our neighborhood, deep in conversation with another woman. "Can you believe what happened to Judith and Veronica?" Sarah whispered, not realizing I was within earshot. "I heard they're practically destitute now." My ears perked up, curiosity getting the better of me. I inched closer, pretending to examine a display of apples. "Serves them right," the other woman replied. "After the way they treated poor Lila and her mother. The whole town's turned against them." Sarah nodded vigorously. "I saw Judith at the grocery store last week. She looked terrible, like she'd aged 10 years overnight." "And Veronica? I heard she can't even show her face around here anymore." A conflicting mix of emotions washed over me. Satisfaction, pity, and a twinge of guilt. I'd known things were bad for them, but I hadn't realized the extent of their fall from grace. As I made my way home, my mind raced. Part of me wanted to revel in their misfortune, to see it as karmic justice for all the pain they'd caused. But another part, the part that sounded suspiciously like Ethan, whispered that taking pleasure in others' suffering would only poison my own heart. I found Mom in the living room, engrossed in a book. She looked up as I entered, her brow furrowing at my expression. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, setting her book aside. I sank onto the couch beside her wheelchair, suddenly overwhelmed. "I overheard some gossip about Judith and Veronica," I admitted. "Apparently, they've become social pariahs. Everyone in town knows what they did to us, and they're paying the price for it." Mom reached out, taking my hand in hers. "And how does that make you feel?" I sighed, struggling to articulate the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Conflicted, I finally said, "Part of me feels vindicated, I guess. Like they're finally getting what they deserve.
But then I feel guilty for feeling that way."
Ethan wouldn't have wanted this." "No," Mom agreed softly.
"He wouldn't have. But he's not here, Lila."
"You are. And you're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. "I miss him so much, Mom," I whispered. "Sometimes I think I'm healing, moving forward. And then something like this happens, and it's like losing him all over again." Mom squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears of her own. I know, sweetheart. Grief isn't linear. It comes in waves. But you're stronger than you know. Ethan saw that in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. We sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I made a decision. I need to see them, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Judith and Veronica. I need to, I don't know, make peace maybe? Mom studied me for a long moment before nodding. If that's what you need to do, then do it. Just be careful, Lila. Protect your heart. The next day, I found myself standing outside the women's shelter where I'd helped Judith and Veronica get settled. My palms were sweaty, my heart racing as I pushed open the door. The receptionist recognized me, offering a sympathetic smile. "They're in the common room," she said, gesturing down the hall. I steeled myself before entering, unsure of what I'd find. The sight that greeted me was a far cry from the proud, polished women I'd known. Judith sat alone by the window, her once immaculate hair now streaked with gray and pulled back in a messy bun. Veronica hunched over a table in the corner, furiously scribbling in a notebook. As I approached, Judith looked up. Her eyes widened in recognition, a mix of shame and defiance flashing across her face. "Lila," she said, her voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" Veronica's head snapped up at the sound of my name. She paled, looking like she wanted to bolt from the room. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I came to see how you were doing," I said simply. Judith barked out a harsh laugh. "How we're doing? We've lost everything. Our home, our friends, our dignity. Are you here to gloat?" I shook my head, feeling a sudden wave of pity wash over me. "No," I said softly. "I'm here because I think it's time we all found a way to move forward." Veronica spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you want to help us? After everything we did?" I thought of Ethan, of the love and compassion he'd shown even in the face of their cruelty. I thought of Mom, her quiet strength and unwavering support. And I thought of myself, the woman I'd become through this crucible of loss and pain. "Because holding on to anger and resentment will only hurt me in the end," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "And because Ethan would have wanted me to find a way to forgive, even if you don't deserve it." As I stood there, facing the two women who had caused me so much pain, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a step towards healing, towards reclaiming the peace that had been stolen from me. In that moment, I realized that true justice wasn't about seeing others suffer. It was about rising above the pain, about choosing to live with kindness and integrity even when it's hard. It was about honoring Ethan's memory by becoming the best version of myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The morning sun streamed through the windows of our new home, casting a warm glow across the living room. I stood at the kitchen counter, sipping my coffee and watching Mom tend to her small herb garden on the balcony. It had been 2 years since we'd left our old life behind, and the peace we'd found here still felt like a miracle some days. "Lila," Mom called, wheeling herself back inside. "Don't forget, we have that community garden meeting this afternoon." I nodded, smiling. We'd thrown ourselves into local volunteer work, finding purpose and connection in helping others. It was a far cry from the isolated, embattled life we'd led before. As I gathered my things for work, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah, my old neighbor. "Thought you should know, Judith and Veronica are moving out of the shelter today. They've found a small apartment across town." I paused, letting the information sink in. It had been months since I'd last seen Ethan's mother and sister. Our last encounter at the shelter had been tense but civil, a tentative truce forged in the ashes of our shared loss. "Everything okay?" Mom asked, noticing my distraction. I showed her the text. "I'm not sure how to feel about this," I admitted. Mom reached out, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to feel any particular way, sweetheart. Their journey is their own now." I nodded, grateful for her wisdom. "You're right. I just hope they've found some peace, like we have. The workday flew by, and soon I found myself at the community center, surrounded by enthusiastic gardeners discussing plans for the upcoming spring planting. As the meeting wrapped up, I noticed a familiar figure hovering near the entrance. Veronica. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I was transported back to that awful day in the hospital, the day we lost Ethan. But the woman before me now bore little resemblance to the spiteful, entitled sister-in-law I'd known. She looked humbled, uncertain. I approached her slowly, giving her plenty of time to retreat if she wanted. But she stood her ground, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Lila," she said softly, I hope it's okay that I'm here. I saw the flyer for the gardening program and thought. It's fine, I assured her, surprised by the lack of animosity I felt. Everyone's welcome here. Veronica nodded, twisting her hands nervously. I wanted to tell you, Mom and I were trying to start over. To be better. I know it doesn't make up for everything we did, but you're right, I interrupted gently. It doesn't, but it's a start. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before Veronica spoke again. You look good, Lila.
Happy.
I'm glad. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. Thank you, I said. I am happy. It hasn't been easy, but you're stronger than any of us gave you credit for, she finished, a rueful smile on her face. Ethan always knew that, didn't he? The mention of Ethan's name sent a familiar pang through my heart, but it wasn't the sharp agony it had once been. Instead, it was a bittersweet ache, a reminder of the love we'd shared and the growth his loss had sparked in me. He did. I agreed. And he'd be proud of you too, for trying to change. Tears welled in Veronica's eyes. I don't deserve your kindness. Maybe not, I said. But Ethan would want me to offer it anyway. That's the kind of man he was, the kind of person I'm trying to be. As Veronica left, promising to return for the next gardening session, I felt a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. The last tendrils of bitterness and resentment I'd been holding on to dissipated, leaving behind a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. That evening, as Mom and I sat on our balcony watching the sunset, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. I wish Ethan could see this, I said softly. See us thriving, see how far we've come. Mom reached over, taking my hand in hers. He does see it, sweetheart. In every kind act, every moment of joy, every time you choose love over bitterness, that's Ethan's legacy living on through you. Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sorrow. You're right, I said. And I'm going to keep honoring that legacy every day. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of contentment wash over me. The road had been long and painful, filled with loss and betrayal, but it had also led me here, to a place of strength, resilience, and hard-won peace. I thought of Judith and Veronica, embarking on their own journey of redemption, of the community we'd built here, full of people supporting and uplifting each other, of Mom, my unwavering rock through it all. And I thought of Ethan, not with the aching grief of before, but with a warm fondness, grateful for the love we'd shared and the lessons that love had taught me. The future stretched out before us, full of possibility. There would be challenges, of course, but I knew now that I had the strength to face them, that we had the strength to face them, together. As night fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, I made a silent promise, to Ethan, to Mom, to myself. I would live fully, love deeply, and always strive to be the best version of myself. Not out of obligation or fear, but because I discovered that was the truest path to happiness. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or justice or even forgiveness. It was about choosing, every day, to live a life that honored the love we'd shared and the growth we'd achieved. And in that choice, I found my greatest victory.